Hello, this is our first Moo Global presentation. We have a interview that will be with Kraig Grady, who is now in Australia, although I met him in Los Angeles many years ago when he was a Harry Partch fanatic. At least the fact is he was making all these instruments and they were in the 43 tone intonation and now he not now, but for a long time, he was captivated, maybe simultaneously with the Parch monophony, with Irv Wilson's concept of scale and what makes usable scales for new compositions, and then going ahead and creating instruments in the tuning. And Stephen James Taylor is someone else who I've gotten to know recently, uh, wonderful person actually, and he's also into that Irv Wilson area. And of course, there's Mr. Hobbs, and the list is getting bigger. This is a California phenomenon, but I do want to get to know Mr. Grady, and we didn't get a chance last time because we couldn't really speak with him with a video. And we really did hear more about Irv Wilson. And now we want to focus a little bit more on Kraig Grady. And I've asked my friend Stephen James Taylor to take over. And figure you know Kraig, and you've been around Moo now, and you get the sense of where we're at, and take over.
All right. Well, thanks, Johnny. This is an exciting interview for me to do because Kraig Grady was the one that actually kind of got me into microtones. It was from hearing his music and cross-examining him about it that it perked my interest and showed kind of what virgin territory it was that he was farming. Kraig is one of the most important composers in the whole West Coast of West Coast origin. Arguably the most knowledgeable person about Irv Wilson's work, in that Kraig has had his hands in literally everything Irv did musically. He has either written something or played with it, just actually got his hands in the soil. When Kraig and Terumi and I kind of rescued Irv's papers when he started to get sick, Kraig and I sat outside my studio for 10 days straight with a dumpster, throwing away duplicate copies. And Kraig could look at one paper and say, got that, nope, don't have this, put it aside, got that. And I don't know of anyone else who could have done that. So his knowledge of that terrain is very, very profound. And he's a multi-dimensional artist. He's a filmmaker, he's a shadow play writer. I've seen a couple of his shadow plays. They're hilarious. They have a great sense of humor. There's a kind of handmade charm that they have. His political commentary is quite astute in them as well. And I wanted to introduce him to everybody who doesn't know him. This is Kraig Grady, the one and only. Kraig, tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe start by kind of talking about yourself, and maybe starting with your musical beginnings, how you got into all of this.
Oh, well, thank you, Stephen. You talk so good for me. I almost feel like I should just let you keep talking. But I guess Stephen is probably the person I've known the longest, in the sense that he's the only person I know from high school. We both went to Marshall High 10 years after Lamont Young had gone there. So that was so we did get to meet Lamont. Yeah, we were too young for that. But so the school should feel proud of the people they've gotten going there. Mark Drescher was actually also in our class. Yeah. So I mean, it's like growing up and being a kind of like a hippie of the 60s, and I think I was quite influenced. Like music was so much a big thing, and quickly from going from Hendrix and the blues and everything, I got quite interested in a lot of experimental music, and Probably Ligeti was probably the one who impressed me the most with his textural pieces. So I think I started writing pieces like that. I ended up staying with Slonimsky for a short period of time, and Doran Stalvey and some of these people, and but then I started to find it rather confining. Like I like, well, all these people are doing different things, but the atonality thing just seemed like it just had a limit as to the range of expression seemed kind of limited. So I was, yeah, I was already looking like, I was like, okay, this revolution has to go on, has to keep going. And so when I was at LACC, one of my teachers was Walter O'Connell, who had actually been Lamont's physics teacher. But so yeah, he was the one who really exposed me to the Xenakis and people like that. And at that point, I was doing like free improvisation, playing a lot with junk, and found objects and that type of stuff. And so I asked Walter, well, can I predict what something will sound like if I cut it in triangular pieces, or is there a way to do this? He said, well, I don't really know, but maybe you should go talk to Irv Wilson, who builds instruments. So I went and I ended up meeting Irv and seeing, like, at that point he was pretty much promoting 31 equal because of the whole Dutch school was going on, and so he was kind of he thought it was was trying to support that whole school. So so that seemed really interesting, and I was halfway there. But then about a few weeks later, there was a performance of a U.S. highball, Parch's piece, like which was done like a year after his death. And when I saw that piece, I just thought, oh man, this is like a whole, the potentiality was just amazing. I just thought, and I mean, electronics seemed interesting, but it was such a, it took tons of money. So here's something that a poor person can actually experiment around with, is, building instruments and stuff. So I went back to Irv, and that's pretty much how I got started working with different intonation.
And so how did he change your musical language and actually kind of foster the development of it?
Well, I think seeing Irv's work, I became Irv was really good about it. Like he would know all this stuff, but usually he would basically answer questions. So he would, like, I told him I was interested in kind of like atonal things, but I wanted to be able to group things better. I mean, I think that was one of the things that bothered me about atonality. Like I wanted to be able to, the ability to group and form different things was kind of, I mean, you can do it with rows, but that's not really acoustically based. So,
right.
Then you had things like the CPSs and things. I think at least at that point, there was still, in the 70s, there's still this interest between tonality or atonality. And so Irv had, these CPS structures, where you can have consonances and yet it could still be atonal, or at least pantonal. So I became very interested in this. And I think from there, I kind of, I could see like the whole potential of what you could do by changing your tuning, and how different tunings are really good for certain things. I think that was quite a bit of it.
And did this affect your sense of rhythm, any of his works? I noticed you had a piece written in 79/8 meter using the decany. Were you combining some of the principles and applying scale making principles to rhythm?
Yeah. That was later. Yeah, I realized that you could actually apply these same type of structures to time also. So I played around with some of that. Should I play a short segment of that?
Whatever you have.
Just like a minute. This piece was like in 79, and it was subdivided like 8-8-8-5, 8-8-8-5, 8-8-5, and so the piece was only 5 bars long, but each bar was repeated. Well, I was repeated once, so maybe 10 bars. But I'll play a little excerpt, maybe one cycle. Let's share the screen, and I'm still sharing the sound. did I do the desktop here? And
Yeah, there it is.
so it's so that
Yeah.
so that was one bar.
Wow.
Um, let's see that. How do I do this? Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yes,
You bet.
that was one. So that used some of Irv's horogram rhythms, where he take one of his patterns,
Mhm.
and so there's this long pattern of 8/8/5, but then there's one layer that uses 3s and 2s that's in the middle there, and then
Can you explain a little bit about what those horogram patterns are and how they're derived?
well, so he would basically have like a cycle and a circle. I don't have the actual horogram diagram that I used,
Right.
but
It's a
so
bunch of concentric circles.
yeah, concentric circles would have different layers of like MOS, moment of symmetry patterns.
Mhm.
So Irv did these, but what I would do is I actually used to take a lid to a plastic paint can lid and cut out each circle and put a needle through it and play around with adjusting these different patterns to see how they interacted, So that's
Yeah, it's very fresh. That piece of music really begs for a shadow play.
yeah, that would be good. Yeah, that one is tough to play. Yeah.
Yeah, to count that much, but
Yeah.
it's really cool. So talk a little bit now about your use of combination product sets, how you use them, how you find patterns, what kinds of patterns, and why you use them.
Well, like I said, I was really interested in, and so those were like the first series of instruments I built were in one of Irv's combination product set things. Actually, the first instrument was a set of brass tubing, but I'll show that when we get more of the instruments. And yes, so I would basically, in order to learn this tuning, I would have to look at like all the different patterns. Really, I'd have to look at all the, how do all the different, tetrads work together? How do all the hexanies work together? And so basically my first compositions were basically just setting up a pattern and composing through that pattern or improvising through that pattern. And then after a while, I had a very good understanding of the tuning, even though it's like a 12-dimensional figure. But at one point, I got to the point where if I heard one tetrad, I knew where everything else was. So which to me was remarkable. I don't have the ear that Johnny has, for instance, but so that yeah. So to me, it became evident these are things that are actually quite learnable, and one can actually feel intuitively.
So you would work out chord progressions.
Sorry, I just wanted to piggyback on that for a second. What you're talking about is what I usually call the GPS quality, where like if you're inside your own tonality, that you just have a pitch, and you have some kind of concept of other pitches, then you know where you are. It's an inner mapping.
Yeah.
Interesting. And in this case, you were actually mapped to a three-dimensional object, right? Did you ever use the three-dimensional objects at Irv Ed, or were you using just the two-dimensional transforms of that?
Yeah, I was using the different two-dimensional flat ones, but I used quite a few different ones. Like I had ones that had a centered lattice, an uncentered lattice, and one that was based on hexads. So, I would look at it in all those different ways. And so should I play a segment of some of that, I think?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, because so this is a piece from let's see, this piece called Creation of the Worlds, and it's played by, it's actually like a double canon in a weird way, but with two people on a marimba, two people on a vibraphone, and one person on a set of low, very large meru bars, and two people on pump organs. It was a 22-tone pump organ where there was a low one and a high one, 4-octave things, but 22 tones, you only can get 2 octaves on each instrument. So this is somewhere in the middle of this, but here we go.
Wow, very nice.
Yeah.
Wow. So what were you doing tonally there? Was that a hexany or icosany or?
Yeah, that used the icosany. It uses 18 pitches out of the icosany. They're two opposite pitches that aren't used, but there are two 8-tone cycles they're actually mirror. One's like the inversion of the other, and it has a certain cross relationship with each other, from one to the other. So it's it's complex, but the thing about the icosany is, like, wherever you are, half your pitches are consonances and half are dissonances. So it's pretty easy to to find.
And for those unfamiliar with the term icosany, it's 2 out of 6. It's like you pick 6 elements, like harmonics 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and it's all the combinations of 2, right?
Or it's the combination of a 3 out of 6.
3 out of 6, pardon me.
Yeah, and this was the actually this one and this one was the 1, 3, 7, 9, 11, 15 icosany, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, because didn't have a 5, but had a 15 instead, because it forms a nice 22-tone scale. You can fill in the gaps, which is a little easier to handle than than a 31 tone instrument.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, so did you have vibes in that, or was that they were?
Yeah,
wireless,
yeah. Yeah, there were two of us on vibraphone. That was me on the lower end, and Aaron Barnes on the upper end with DJ Bombrecht of X, the band, the drummer of X. He was on the marimba with Joe Berardi, the drummer of the Fibonacci's. So that was, yeah.
Oh, good.
And then the person playing the low bars was Jose Feliciano's percussionist. So yeah, that's yeah. We did this at PASIC, among other places.
Where?
At the percussion, PASIC, the Percussion Arts Society International Conference or something like that. Yeah. I think that's what it's named.
Now tell us a little bit about this vibraphone. So how is it tuned? Whenever I've heard you play it solo, you create those harmonic clouds that almost operate separately from the music you're playing. How is it you do that, and how is that instrument tuned and built?
Well, okay, well that's a different that's actually a different vibraphone, the ones that I could play that. But this one, the bars were originally tuned by Paul Beaver and Irv. It was actually Irv's vibraphone, where they got two Genco vibraphones and retuned the bars to this 22 tone thing. I mean, they wanted to get the full D'Alessandro, but they couldn't find the third set.
Explain the D'Alessandro scale.
Yeah, so that uses the combination product sets. First, it goes through the 1 out of 6 sets. So it starts with the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. So you have the harmonic series up to 12 there, and then it takes a combination of 2 out of 6 of those, and the 3 out of 6 sets, which is the icosany, then the 4 out of 6 sets, which mirrors the 2 out of 6, and the 5 out of 6 is the subharmonic series, which mirrors the harmonic one. Yeah. Yeah. The one of the vibraphone, the vibraphone that you're speaking of is tuned to a tuning of Irv's called Meta Slendro, and that's actually formed by using a recurrent sequence, kind of similar to the Fibonacci series, but instead of a bit A plus B equals C, it's actually A plus B equals D. So you have to seed it with 3 harmonics, and so I think the highest on a 12 tone instrument, the highest prime I have is 151, or highest odd numbers, and then so
they're all created. The tones are all created through that sort of algebraic iterative process, right?
Yeah.
A plus B is D. So like A plus B is C would be the Fibonacci, right?
Yeah.
2 plus 3 is 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. Or 4 plus 11, or 4 plus 7 is 11. 7 plus 11 is 18, right?
Yeah.
But there'll be a non-included number between A plus B equals D, and then you end up with these. So wouldn't you say that the recurrent sequences are kind of somewhere between just intonation and moments of symmetry? The sort of
Yeah, because they're influenced by moments of symmetry, because they form scales at the same places, but you get the slight variation. I mean, you could I mean, the thing about the recurrent sequences, they all converge on some number, and you could just tune to that. You could just take that and just repeat that. But Irv said that he always liked the slight difference. So it'd give each key a slight difference, like you get in some like well temperaments, for instance. So, and I've agreed. I've tried to do both, and I've actually found, I think he was correct about that. At least the aesthetic, it sounds more less artificial and aware. I don't know what sounding artificial is, but I don't know.
Yeah,
it seems to fit. I could play you. Should I play a bit of that vibraphone?
That would be great. Yeah.
And so this is actually performed by Clocks and Clouds, which is my duet with Terumi, And this is a piece called Calabros. And this one centers quite a bit along clusters in this 12-tone tuning. But it's kind of fun. You could retune a 12-tone instrument, and it, but it didn't sound anything like a conventional 12. Yeah. So the vibraphone is also a pump organ.
Oh.
Really, yeah. Well, this goes on for another 7 minutes.
Well, I've heard you do things like that live, and I have to say the air in the room changes. Something happens to the air. You turn your head just to the side a little bit, and you hear something different. Is that because of the beating and the phase cancellations? What makes that phenomenon occur?
Yeah, because you're working with a recurrent sequence, you have like all these equal beating sonorities, and they all kind of reinforce each other. So really, it kind of like will actually force the room to have standing waves, whether the room is actually that dimensions or not. Right. And it's not uncommon for the sound to sound like it's in the corner of a room. And what I finally figured out is that the corner of rooms like often will act as almost like a trough resonator. You know, and I think that's what happens. And so, you know, it's so that it'll just, you know, these different points in the room will bring out certain things. Yeah.
Well, so let me ask you this. Based on the particular frequencies you're using, could you theoretically calculate a perfect room for that? Were those?
Yeah.
You would calculate the wavelengths, right?
Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, yeah, you'd have to figure out all three directions and just pray you don't, you know, vibrate yourself to death, you know.
Yeah. Not a bad way to go though. Death by vibration.
Yeah, I know. Like someone wanted me to use like have like some very large aluminum bars tuned to the same tuning, and they wanted me to play in this. Not almost like this kind of like cave, you know. And I said, no, I'm not playing these in the cave because I don't know what the acoustics. You never know what you know. Like you get these type of waveforms, you never know exactly what's going to happen, you know.
Yeah, you get enough wattage, right?
Yeah. Well, there was one time when we played in Melbourne at a school, and me and Terumi, and after we were done, one of the students said, did you know you were playing at 99 decibels? So
Really?
yeah, so
With a vibraphone?
yeah, we did just completely acoustic and with the organ, So it puts out, you can actually put out quite a bit of power, I think it's like I think what it is certain sonorities will all of a sudden just jump up and do something.
Right.
And so a lot of times I have trouble recording these things live, and for this reason. And but I've enjoyed that I've played, in all these different places without the use of amplification, because
that's part of why I was asking that. I'm remembering a concert that I think Bill Alves might have hosted it at Harvey Mudd College, where before you came on, Ron George came on, and he had all of these found percussion objects, filled the stage with them. And then you came on with one set of vibes, and you were louder than he was, with his 4 people banging on plates. And I couldn't figure out where is all this volume coming from when you didn't have an amplification. So that's what it is. There must be the compression and rarefaction in different ways of the air, that if you held up a sound pressure meter and it happened to be in one of those spots, you would actually get a spike probably, huh?
Yeah. Well, I think what, the only places I could play in the 80s were like in basically punk clubs, those, because academic, it's like I know Johnny probably remembers this time when, people really look down on microtones. No one can hear the difference, and it sounds out of tune, and that's all you'd hear. But, I found that, a lot of punk bands liked having something different before them. So I did that quite a bit. But, and then in that environment, where people were used to loud sounds, if you didn't play, you had to at least be a certain level, otherwise people would just talk over you.
Walk away.
Yeah. So I had to work towards it,
Yeah. Now, how do you notate some of this stuff? I mean, you've obviously changed your approach to notation over the years, but how do you approach that? Because that's always a conundrum, I think, in microtonality. Everyone has their own sort of approach to it. There's no real uniform, methodology of notation. What's your particular approach?
Well, because this metaslendro is probably the tuning I'm working with the most, because the instruments are small enough where I can get a whole ensemble in one instrument. I guess the trouble with the big CPS instruments, it was like one instrument would take up a whole vehicle, so it became really hard to do shows. So working with these 12-tone instruments, I just use tablature, so I just write it. Yeah, I just write it and then refer to the notes as to what they are on the keyboard. So it's not really helpful to other people as far as solving notation. Because these sounds change in different rooms, I found that like certain sonorities would come out stronger, and then other sonorities would not. So I found that I had to allow much more freedom as far as the duration of events. So I tend to notate pitch, but I don't notate rhythm or duration, except in the horogram pieces. It's probably the biggest exception. So I could show let's see, a score. I have a score to the last one, in fact. Let's see.
Okay, good.
Where did it go? It's under. Let's see, it's hidden under the.
You got the full of the interview?
Yeah, I got some. So like the piece we were just listening to. Let's see. Whoops. Sorry. Have to wait for this to open. So it is. So because reading notes at a vibraphone is rather difficult, trying to read staff lines, a lot of times I'll just write it out like this. So in this piece, Terumi has a different part than I, but what we'll do is we'll start at the top, and we can go to the next chord whenever we want to. But then when we get to a solid line, we wait until the other person reaches there. So it goes. So what'll be these certain things where certain chords will be on the same chord, and then we'll go to different sonorities, and then we come back together. So the whole piece kind of evolves that way. At least that's how that one is.
So that's two instrument parts right there, right?
Well, this is only
One
one.
on the left, one on the right.
Yeah. So this is it all fits on one page. I mean,
I see.
I'm always trying to figure out how I can get as much on one page as possible, because it's very hard to turn pages on a vibraphone,
especially when you have two mallets.
Yeah, and you're playing at the speed. You don't really want to just break it up for any other reason. Some of the I guess let's see one of the other score, but does sometimes like a different piece for vibraphone and organ is this one, where the bottom part is like in clavar scripto, I guess, or I don't think I'm pronouncing it right, but where each line represents a sharp or a flat, and the spaces in between are the natural notes. So Prumi will actually read this with the score turned 90 degrees clockwise. And so like the diamonds are, this piece actually played with weights. Like the diamonds are actually weights are placed on the keyboard.
Oh.
The X's are where are the weights lifted off. And then the circular ones are ones that are actually played with your fingers. So it kind of goes at the at the speed that the player wants to do. And this piece has 5 different pages, and we start and we end together. It just without any other things like that.
So always very different each time you play it then.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, I think like playing in clubs, you'd see these bands and they'd play like the same set all the time. And after a while, you could just see that they were getting bored playing the same music exactly the same. So I think it was another reason why I like to leave a certain amount of flexibility in the pieces. It makes it.
So that seems sort of crucial to your compositional process. Is there is an improvisation element that usually informs the form.
Yeah. It's very true. I mean, a lot of times composition becomes very stiff, and a lot of times, improvisation just becomes too wandering. So I feel like you almost like need elements of both in order to, get things to work.
But do you find in a live situation, it depends on what's going on in the room, just like with jazz musicians, if a sax player is really on, he goes a little longer, right? The band knows, let him play a little longer until he finishes the thought, and that's how the piece will be different every time. Is it the same with this, where do you have the flexibility to say, wow, this thing is really grooving, whatever is locked in, to make that longer on the spot and actually alter the form of the piece?
Yeah, very, very much so. Sometimes it'll just, I'll just, being the composer, I'll take liberties even from my own score, as Trumi would probably, testify. Like, where did that part come from? I'll come back to it, but it's important to stay in the present, I think. I think it depends on what else has been played, even, and the room and the activity of the audience and things like that. I think all these things kind of add, allows a certain amount of intangible interaction. I think, it's like you're dealing with these intangible things, but they actually are quite important, I think, in the long run, I think.
So you build that kind of flexibility into it to be able to accommodate those
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of dynamics.
yeah.
Interesting. Describe a little bit how you find and use patterns in your music. I mean, in the formation of it.
Well, I think for instance, the piece I just played, where I would look at all the different. I was looking at all the different clusters and different 7-tone and 5-tone scales, and then I would kind of just arrange those. A lot of times it's a matter of finding the things I like and then organizing it in some type of pattern all its own. Where the like the CPS pieces, there's so many wonderful patterns in there. It's kind of hard to ignore them. But I think, at one point where I would just go through them, I think towards the end I would get to a point where, well, I'd go through a pattern. Well, I like this part of the pattern, but no, I don't really like this part over here. And so I would just use what it is that I like. But it had the advantage of like if I just wrote everything by ear, there's always a tendency to write things like what you've already heard. So a lot of times I like the patterns will kind of force me into an area that I wouldn't necessarily, fall into. And yet I'd still, obviously when I'm working with it, I only pick what I like. So
And do you work with Irv's diagrams as sort of references that you keep handy as you're composing?
Yeah. Sometimes I'll do that, and sometimes I think if I'm like being his students, I've also often like reorganized some of the things. Like for instance, here's here's a score. It's I got too many things. I can't get to the getting around, but so this piece is based on pentagram shapes. This one actually works with decanies, and so you can see that you have these 3 4-note chords, at each end of this pentagram, and the single letter ones, like if you look at A, C sharp, D, D sharp, and you'll see an A going down to the lower left, connecting it to F sharp, G, A. That is the note in common between those 2 chords. So basically, this structure just allows the players to freely wander around the different structures, and there's 3 of them, so you can go from one structure to the other. If you.
So the tetrads are on the vertices, and then those notes like A and C, those are on the lines. How does the player interpret those? I mean, is that
well to move from one to the other, they have to drop down to that note.
Oh, I see.
And then go on to the next one. So it's kind of like a expanding, And then what happens is that after you play it, a bunch of times, is you end up finding there's certain things you like more than others, and sometimes these things actually solidify into something much more linear, just because of what seems to work, I think. Yeah.
And what kind of rhythm would be superimposed on that? Is it up to the player to determine how long it takes to get from one tetrat to the next?
Yeah, and would change with the instruments too, and all those things. Yeah, so this could actually be played by any instruments, and it wouldn't sound very good in 12 equal. But,
No.
And in Metacelendra, it looks pretty well. I can't seem to get rid of the lines, but so let's see. There's I could play. Let's see. Maybe I should play. Let's see. I can't seem to get. This thing has gone to the top of the thing, and I can't get to the. I can't get to the thing. Okay. Okay. Here's a piece for hammer dulcimer, using a different recurrent sequence of a tuning called Metamobila, which are based on the Chopi tuning of that village.
It was in Tanzania. Was that where it was?
Or in Mozambique.
Mozambique,
Yeah. And what's kind of fun about this scale is how like the major scale is kind of like has a 7-tone scale that is large, large, small, large, 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 small, whole tones and semitones. This one has a 7-tone scale that's small, small, large, small, 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 large. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like turned inside out on some weird thing. But the funny thing about it is it doesn't really sound that unusual, and I don't know if it's just because of being exposed to diatonic music my whole life that it kind of imposes a structure upon this tuning, or if it just sounds like that even to, let's say, people there. But so I'll play an excerpt. So this is a piece for hammered dulcimer.
Yeah, that's wow. And that was Meta Mabala?
Yeah, Meta Mabala, yeah.
A 12-tone scale, or?
Oh, that's a 7 and 9-tone scale, actually, is what it is. Yeah, it forms a nice 16-tone scale. I actually have a vibraphone tuned to the 16, and unlike how the piano has like 2 blacks and 3 blacks, the layout of this one actually has 3 blacks and 4 blacks. So it's very confusing. But Navarro, that goes back to Navarro, did that layout.
Augusto Navarro. Well, let's see. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you one more thing. Can you just say a little bit about your concept of anaphoria, and what you call visionary geography? What exactly? How explain that?
I think what happened was it's like with even with like Parcher's instruments. When seeing Parcher's instruments live, they always seem like even the sound always seemed like they belonged to some culture, but didn't really. But it was kind of like this culture that really didn't have any real place.
Yeah.
So I found that my own instruments kind of had like that, ended up having that same type of feel for me, and so I started to just mentally start to play with, well, what happens if I create the place in my mind, and how would that influence the music? So I was asked to do a concert at the Pacific Asia Museum, and so I thought, oh well, this is a great excuse to do this. So I said it was music from Anaphoria Island, and did a concert there. So I think that kind of started, but then I kind of liked the concept, and just it's a kind of like I think of it as a place of exiles. It's a place where different aspects that are like thrown away other places you know, has a place to live, you know, so kind of like a
Didn't,
sanctuary.
didn't you actually take it as far as trying to apply to the State Department for diplomatic status or
Well,
as an
I
actual
tried.
country?
Yeah, well, actually, I did have a nonprofit organization when I was still in the United States.
Yeah.
It was, but yeah, I knew someone that worked at the Dutch consulate, and I tried to get them to let me be a cultural exile. But the first time they laughed at me, and the second time they said, yeah, I can understand that's not such a bad idea, but it never really happened.
Well, great. So, Johnny, should we open this up to questions, or is this a good time to?
I would think, yes, for about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Anybody want to speak? Just go ahead and speak. Well, at least I'll always have a question, you know that.
I guess I should say people can, you know, I have a Bandcamp page under Anaphoria. If people wants to hear the longer things, I guess we didn't get to hear some of the pieces I've done where I've actually cut and pasted different recordings of instruments playing that you know, against a tuner, and then built up pieces that way, kind of like sampling, but with actual sound pieces.
You've got a whole group of those that are absolutely fascinating, because they, at first listen, you say, well, that's staying on the same chord, and then when you listen carefully, it's moving all over the place. There are chord progressions within the single chord by manipulating harmonics. It was well, we'll get into that maybe the next time. But Johnny, you had a question.
Well, I just would say that we're going to do a Novaro session next year.
Oh, good.
All set up. It'd be tough for Kraig because Kraig, of course, is in a different time zone. So you might want to do a video presentation, but you won't know what they're going to say until they say it. So that's, you know, that's, you know, the challenge.
I'll try and be awake.
And just to clear up a thought I had about what you were saying, make sure I understand it, is so on top of harmonics, you have this other factor that is a MOS that is going to give you a consonant dissonant feel that I would maybe call a zonk. You know, if you could use the old Ivor Dorig idea, that Irv Wilson has his own zonk that's independent of just harmonics. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, because he's working with proportional relationships too.
Right.
So a lot of
Algebra.
different.
Irrationals.
Yeah.
Well, but different sounds come into play.
Also,
right?
Yeah.
But then what the other thing you're doing is you're using a tone that's common always, it seems like, unless it's just that one piece that moves from one simultaneity to another.
Sometimes, I mean, I don't really think of myself as working with drones as much as working with very slow moving melodies. I think that's more how I think about it. Yeah. But yeah, I think maybe the section of the creation of the worlds just happened to be a place where the organ player, I don't know, decided to sit on it. But yeah, it's very easy for these things to move around. Yeah.
Okay.
Stephen had a question.
Oh. Stephen
Weigel.
Hi, I was wondering if you use any scales with 3 different kinds of step sizes or 4 different kinds of step sizes in a similar manner to how you use MOS scales that are not just scales.
Yeah, I say I don't really I don't think I've used any MOS scales ever. I think I've only used constant scales that are just scales or with multiple step sizes. Like I don't really, I think MOSs are like kind of like it's kind of like a skeleton idea, and then from there you have different intonational variations. So I've always, none of this stuff is in a strict MOS scale.
That's really fascinating. I definitely thought you had used at least one, but I misremembered.
Yeah. I was like, at one point I tried to think, well, I must have used, like I've used them in the rhythms. The rhythm pieces use very strict on it because it's like either one or two or, you know, multiples. But yeah, none of the, I think when I actually thought about it, yeah, I hadn't actually used one. Yeah.
I'm going to take this moment to stop the recording.